all, my name is Darian and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in January. So in January I actually had a pretty good reading month. I ended up reading 7 books, which is not as good as December but still pretty good for me. So let's just chat about all the books that I read. So I started out the year reading 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, and I didn't know what to expect when I picked this book up, but I had heard from a lot of people that this was just a really cute romance, and I feel like I was misled a bit because there are a lot of dark things in this book. So in this book you're following 2 characters, Shane and Ava. Wow, it feels like I read these books like 3 months ago instead of just this past month, so my apologies if I forget a lot about these books. But Shane and Ava, I'm quite sure those are their names, and they are 2 writers, and they actually knew each other when they were in high school. They spent 1 week together where they shared this like whirlwind romance, and they were just in love with each other, and then something happened that drew them apart, and then they end up meeting again like 20 or 30 years later when they're both adults. And it turns out that in the books that they've been writing, their characters are based off of each other, so in a way they've been like writing to each other all these years, which is very sweet. In terms of the romance in this book, I thought the relationship was just really nice. I don't know about cute. I really liked seeing how the relationship developed both when they were younger and in the present day. I will say though, this book does have trigger warnings for drug addiction, for self-harm, and for gun violence, and like I want to stress that this is not like just a cute romance. It talks about these topics, especially that self-harm. It talks about it in a great detail, so I would keep that in mind before picking this book up, because especially listening to the audiobook, I kind of felt nauseous listening to some of the parts of this book. Like, I don't know, I feel like when people talk about this book they don't bring those up, and I feel like that's really important to mention, so just definitely keep those in mind before you pick this book up. But I really liked it. I think this is Tia Williams' debut if I'm not mistaken, and I just think it was a really well written story. Also, Ava deals with chronic migraines, and I thought the chronic illness rep was done very well. I will say there were a few parts that kind of like I had a bit of issue with. Like, there was one joke about asexuals that was kind of just thrown in there, and like they kind of just moved past it, and I was like, what? Like, why was that necessary? I don't know. So I don't know, that I mean obviously that bothered me, and like it was such a small part of the book. It was like 1 sentence, but it just seemed to not make any sense why it was there, and then no one just questioned what they said, so that bothered me. And there was just a few other parts like that I was kind of like, what? And then it just kept going and I was like, okay. But yeah, like I said, this is definitely a darker book than I thought it was, so like I said, keep those trigger warnings in mind. But I did give this book 4 stars, and I am very interested to read any other books by this author in the future. The next book I read in December was The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox. Now, I will say I should have known I wouldn't like this book before I went into it, because I really don't like stories where people, especially identical twins, because I mean, that's really the only time this trope happens, but when people swap places and like they pretend to be each other, that's basically what this book is about. I know that's like The Parent Trap, and I've never seen that movie, and it's because I hate that trope, so I really shouldn't have picked this book up. But anyways, so this follows 2 sisters. What are their names? Charlie and Cass. So Charlie is a baker on this famous like baking show, like think of a show you watch on Food Network or something, and she is hoping for a promotion coming up, but it's basically between her and her co-star, who she hates. Like, he is just really unpleasant to work with, so she's really hoping to kind of show her best at work to get this promotion over her co-star. But she has an accident at work where she suffers from a concussion, and she ends up losing her sense of taste and smell, and obviously this is a problem if you are on a baking show. So she calls up the help of her sister Cass, who still lives in their hometown, and she runs the family's bakery, and she asks her if she can switch places with her to pretend to be her on the show, and then she will run the bakery back home. So they do that, and then both of them meet men from each other's lives and fall in love with them, but obviously this is a problem because the men think that they are their sister. So like the fact that both of these relationships started off in lies, I feel like that's already not a great sign. This book just was not for me. Again, I don't know why I picked it up, because I went into it knowing I probably wouldn't like it, but I thought I would still like have a good time because it was like just a fun like holiday romance. But it did not work for me. I did like, the ending was so cheesy, but I did like the ending, so it wasn't like a horrible time the whole time I was reading it, but like every time I put it down I never wanted to pick it back up. So if you like that trope, then you'll probably love this. Like, I think it is a fun book for what it is. Like, it's not some great piece of literature or anything, but for the next holiday season, if you're looking for a fun holiday romance, maybe pick this up. But if you don't like that trope like me, then maybe not. But I gave this book, I think I gave it 2.5 stars, so. Also, I just kept getting annoyed with Charlie and how she just kept dismissing her symptoms as she was feeling from her concussion. Like, I've had people in my family suffer from really awful concussions, so I was like, girl, you need to freaking lie down. Like, I was getting so mad at her because she was just so blasé about it, and I was like, please just rest. Oh my god. Like, anyways, I could go off on a whole rant about that, but yeah, this book was just not for me, so I gave it 2.5 stars. I don't know, maybe you'll like it. I didn't. Okay, the next book that I read, oh my god, it was so amazing. That was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This book was just, like, I had high hopes for this book, but I was trying to keep my expectations kind of low because I've heard so many amazing things about this book. But this book came out, I think in like I want to say 2017. Yeah, 2017. And so since then, I feel like the hype for this book kind of died down. Like, I feel like not that many people are reading it now. I feel like, I mean, the hype kind of came back up when the show came out, but now that's done. So I feel like the hype has died down again since then. But anyways, I was trying to keep my expectations pretty low when I picked this up, but I ended up loving this. This was so good, and I listened to the audiobook of this book, and it was just such an amazing audiobook. And I will say the beginning of the book, it starts out kind of slow, so I wasn't super into it at the beginning, but then it just started going and then it kept going. So basically, you're following this small town, like this suburban neighborhood. You're following two families. One of them is the Richardsons. Yeah, oh my god, my memory. She's working hard right now. But the Richardsons is a very wealthy white family. The mother is played by Reese Witherspoon in the show, so just have that image in your mind. They're like very much your typical nuclear family, and they're just, you know, they're wealthy, and they have 3 kids, but one of the daughters in the book is like kind of an outcast in the family. Like, she's kind of seen as always acting out and like doing things that the rest of the family doesn't approve of, and because of this, that kind of makes her act out more. So she's kind of the black sheep of the family. Then there's another family that just moves into the town, and that is the Warrens, and it's just the single mom and her daughter, and the daughter befriends some of the children of the other family, and so their lives kind of intersect. And the Warrens are not as wealthy as the Richardsons, and they kind of have this secretive past that we don't really know about, and that even the daughter, what's her name, Pearl, that Pearl doesn't even really know about. Throughout this story, we find out about Pearl's mom's past and some other things. There's also a custody battle going on in the neighborhood that you kind of see the perspective from both family sides of what they think about this custody battle, and also just how the two families' lives intersect. And at the very beginning of the book, like I think it's literally the first chapter, you know that the Richardsons' house ends up in flames, and then it kind of goes back in time and you see how you got to that point. So this book was just wild. First of all, the writing in this book I absolutely loved. This is my first book I've read from Celeste Ng, and I want to read everything she writes now. The beginning of the book was kind of slow for me, but like once I was hooked, I was hooked. Like, she just did not let me go, and I see now like why the beginning was kind of slow. Like, you kind of had to set up the scene first and then you had to get into it. So I just I loved this book so much, so I give it 5 stars. And there's also a lot of discussion about race and wealth disparity in this book. Like, the baby that the custody battle involves is Chinese, and the battle is between her birth mother and the white family that has adopted her, and you're not really sure what the right answer is in this battle. I mean, I have my opinions, but I can also see why people would have opposing opinions. And like, this issue, it's not black and white. There's no right or wrong answer. Like, you can have your opinions, but it seems like in this situation, it just makes you think. Like, I was reading this and like I would have to stop listening, just be like, hey, no, like what do I think about this? Like, and it just kind of made me think of not only these situations happening in the book, but also just things that happen in life. And I don't know, it just changed my perceptions of things, and the ending was just wild. And oh my god, I was so stressed listening to the end of this book. Lisa and Kasey can attest to that, but it was just such a great and well-written book. So yeah, I give it 5 stars, and it's my favorite book of the month, and I cannot wait to read her other books. So yes, if you haven't picked this book up, like, believe the hype, it is great, and I highly recommend this one. The next book I read in January was A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabo, and this is the first book in the Mirror Visitors series, I think it's called. This is a series that's been translated from French, and once I have finished the series, I wouldn't mind going back and trying to read the like original French text as a way also to practice my French, but also to see if I understand everything. But anyways, this is a series, I'm not really sure how to describe this, but you're following this character named Ophelia, and she has two powers. One of them is that when she touches objects, she can see the like history of the object basically, and she can also travel through mirrors, which comes in handy a lot. And basically at the beginning of the book, her family has arranged for her to be engaged to this guy from another, they call it arcs, and I didn't really understand what an arc was, like if it was just another country, but I guess just another place. Like at first I thought every place in this book like was just this floating island, but I think it's just where the guy is from, looks like this. But I'm not really sure. I did find the world building kind of confusing at times. I think that's mostly due to the translation of the book. Like I feel like not everything came across quite clearly in the translation, so there were times in this book where I was just like, what's happening? Like I'm not really sure. But she's engaged to this guy from another place, another arc, it says. So she is sent off to go with him to his home, but there are a lot of people from where he comes from that kind of resent this engagement and therefore resent her by extension, and people are against his family for certain reasons, and so there's just a lot of drama that ensues from there. Yeah, that's basically what you need to know before going into this book. So I really enjoyed this book, but like I said, there were times where I was just confused because I think it is due to the translation. Like I explained, like I'm not really sure how the world works exactly. I was confused reading this, but what really made the book for me was the characters. First of all, I loved Ophelia so much. Like at first she seemed like one of those YA characters that's like not like other girls, and like she kept tripping and I was like, oh my god, we have another character who's clumsy. But then like she has a reason why she's so clumsy, and I was like, okay, I'll forgive you. But she's also like really funny and really sassy. I just loved her so much. She just had so much sass in her, and I was so proud of her. And Thorn, who is her love interest, oh my god, I love this man so much. He is so tall and he is so grumpy, like one of the most grumpy men I've ever come across, and therefore I'm in love with him. Like I love the grumpy boys, especially when they're tall, and like the amount of times they talked about how tall he is in this book and like how much bigger he is than Ophelia. I loved that. So I cannot wait to continue reading their stories. Also, like, you don't learn very much about Thorn in this book. Like he's very closed off and he's very grumpy, like I said. Near the end of the book you kind of start to learn more about him, but even then like he's pretty much still a mystery at this point. So I cannot wait to continue this series and learn more about them, and like there are other characters in this book that I just want to know more about. And yeah, I had a really fun time reading this. I just found it a bit confusing at times, so I gave this 4 stars, but I'm really excited to continue this series. The next book I read was the Winer's Book Club pick for January, and that was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, and I loved this book so much. It was so well written. You're following these two characters. What are their names? So you're following these two sisters, Stella and Desiree, and they come from a really small town in the south, and in their community it is mostly light-skinned black people, and they're very poor growing up, and they eventually run away together one day, and for a while they live together in New Orleans, I think, and then one day Stella leaves Desiree and Stella decides to continue living her life as a white woman, but Desiree just continues her path as a black woman, and you follow both of their lives and how they differ, and then you end up following the lives of their daughters as their daughters end up meeting by accident one day. You see how different their lives are growing up. It was just such an interesting book, and similar to Little Fires Everywhere, like in this book there's no like right or wrong answer to the choices that the characters make. I wouldn't say that Stella made the right or wrong choice or Desiree made the right or wrong choice. Like really you can kind of see why every character in this book would make the decisions they made, except for some of them. Obviously, like Desiree ends up marrying a man who beats her. Obviously I do not understand his decisions, but I'm mostly talking about the two sisters in this book. There is trigger warnings for domestic abuse and sexual assault, as well as racism and colorism in this book, but I just thought it was such an interesting discussion on race and, again, wealth in America, especially in the South, and how people treat each other. And I've read so many books where people are discriminated discriminated against because of their race, but I feel like I haven't read too many that deal with colorism, and that's obviously a very real problem in the world. And so this was just a very interesting read for me, and I thought the writing was just so well written. Like, I flew through this book, and I feel like historical fiction often takes me longer to read because I really want to like let everything soak in and take my time with the story. But with this book, I was like, the way it was written, it was kind of almost written like a mystery. I found like I just really wanted to find out more about these characters' lives, and it's not like there's a grand reveal at the end of this book, but I found just the way it was written, it was just, it's not necessarily fast-paced. I don't know if I'm explaining myself properly, but I wouldn't say this book is fast-paced, but it was just like I needed to keep reading to see what would happen in these characters' lives. Like, I ended up caring so much about these characters, and I was just so interested in what happened to them and if Stella and Desiree would ever reunite. I just couldn't put this book down, and as of right now, when this video goes up, I think we will have already had our discussion on this book, so I will leave that linked down below if you want to check it out. But I'm so excited to talk about this with the rest of the whiners, and I gave this 4.5 stars. The only reason I didn't give it 5 is sometimes the way it was written, it would often go back and forth between timelines very quickly. So like in the middle of a paragraph, we would all of a sudden be in the past again. I was just not catching on fast enough, so I'd be reading and then they would be talking about stuff from the past, but I thought we were still in the present, and so I was just getting very confused. So I think that was mostly a me problem, but that's the only thing I had with this book that stopped me from giving it 5 stars. But yeah, 4.5 stars. I highly recommend this book to everyone. I think everyone should pick this book up, and also this cover. Is it not so beautiful? It is. And now I really want to read The Mothers also by Britt Bennett, so yes. The next book I read, I won't spend too much time on because I did read this book for school, but that is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is, I think, the second book I've read from her because I did read Orlando when I was in college. But this book is very short, but it took me so long to read because this book was really boring. Virginia Woolf really said, no plot, just vibes. Like, there really is no plot in this book. Basically, this book is split up in 3 parts, and the whole first part of the book takes place in the span of a day. You're following these characters who are up at their lake house, and I think it's like off the coast of Scotland or something. And basically, like, the story of the book, I guess, is that, I mean, you're following mainly one family, the Ramseys, and like the parents are only known as Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, and one of their sons, because they have like 8 children or something, one of their sons is like, can we go to the lighthouse tomorrow? And Mr. Ramsey is like, no, the weather's gonna be so bad. And Mrs. Ramsey is like, maybe we'll see, because she doesn't want to disappoint her son. And that's like the inciting incident to the book, because the rest of the book they just keep talking about the lighthouse and going to the lighthouse and are we gonna get to go to the lighthouse tomorrow? And like, you're just following these characters in this day and you're going through their thoughts, and it's very like stream of consciousness writing. Obviously Virginia Woolf is a very talented writer, okay? Like, that's not like breaking news or anything. You don't need me to tell you that. So there is beautiful writing in here, and this is just very much a character study of all of these characters. Like, you have Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, you have some of their children that it focuses on, and there's also like some family friends thrown in there. But for me to enjoy a book, like, obviously characters are very important, but I need a plot, and there was just no plot in this book because, like I said, the first part of this book takes place in the span of a day. Then the second part of the book is like 10 years. And then the third part of the book is another day. That just that just didn't work for me, and if I had read this on my own, I probably would have DNF'd it because I had no idea what was going on, because it took me a while to realize that especially the first part was only in the span of a day and that we were just in the heads of these characters thinking about random things. I don't know. I didn't love this book, but I appreciate what this book did, and I can appreciate Virginia Woolf's writing, so I gave this 3 stars because I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's just that it wasn't necessarily for me, and I did find it pretty boring. But yeah, if you want to pick it up, go for it. I don't know, but yeah, this was a 3-star for me. Okay, last but definitely not least is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. I read this for the Shadowhunters read along, and in January we read City of Bones, obviously. And our live show is going to be on February 7th on Lisa's channel. We don't have a time yet, but it is going to be on that day, so mark your calendars. I think this video will be up before then, but it's also possible it won't be. So we'll keep you updated. If it already happened, I hope you enjoyed the live show. But yeah, so I don't really need to explain what this book is about, I don't think. First book in the Mortal Instruments series, and you're following this girl named Clary who thinks she is human, but she soon discovers that there is a whole world that she didn't know about full of shadow hunters and demons and downworlders, and she herself might be a shadow hunter, and that her mom kind of has a past, but her mom has gone missing, and so she meets these shadow hunters that help her try to find her mom, and there's just all sorts of things that go on. And like, I never planned on rereading the Mortal Instruments series. I thought maybe one day I would just like continue with the books that I haven't read yet, but then we decided to do the Shadowhunters read along, so I was like, okay. So I was expecting not to love these books very much, but I ended up really having a great time with this book. Like, it just brought me back to being 14 years old and just consuming the heck out of these books. I read this series so fast when I was younger, and like, I wouldn't say that this first book aged super well. This book came out in 2007, and like, there were a lot of things in this book that I was like, so it's definitely by no means a perfect book. Like, I don't even know if I love the writing so much. I feel like Cassandra Clare has probably improved so much since she wrote this first book, but it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how her writing changes throughout these whatever 18 books that I'm about to read. I just had such a fun time with this. Like, the story, it's not like the most original story, but also just getting introduced to this world again. I don't know, I just had a great time with this, and like, surprisingly, I didn't hate Jace. Like, I seem to remember not liking Jace very much, but he was pretty funny, and obviously Simon is funny, and like, Clary didn't annoy me that much, so I don't know, maybe I'm a Mortal Instruments stan now, I don't know. But I gave this book 4 stars. Honestly, in terms of enjoyment, it like felt like a 5-star, but I really can't in good conscience give this book 5 stars when it has some problematic elements, and also like the writing is not the best. But yeah, I just thought it was such a fun time, and I hope you guys will join us in the rest of the Shadowhunters read along. And like I said, if we haven't had our live show yet, I hope you'll join us for that, but if it's already happened, I'll also leave that linked down below. So yeah, so those are the 7 books that I read in January. I'm sorry if I feel like I wasn't getting my point across a lot in this video. I have just been filming for like 2 hours, and my thoughts are just all over the place right now, so I apologize for that. Hopefully I made some sort of sense in this video, but thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite book was in January. Mine was obviously Little Fires Everywhere. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!